for Equity and Inclusion, a masterclass for K through 12 educators and district leaders. I am Tanya Slane, and I'm pleased to be your host this afternoon. Just wanted to do a quick slide check. Thank you. A couple of housekeeping items. As participants, you are in listen-only mode. If you would like to interact with our speaker, you can do so in the question box. The speaker may be asking for engagement during the webinar, but we will host a question and answer session at the end. I will gladly read your questions out loud so Dr. Manning can address them live. If we run out of time, we are happy to make sure that we follow up with all of you individually to address your questions. If you're having technical issues, please reach out via the question box, and our marketing director, Chris Poza, will do his best to assist you and answer any additional questions. We are recording this webinar and will provide you with a recording and the slide deck. So if you do have technical difficulties, we're happy to address them with the follow-up as well. A little bit about your sponsor for today's webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Xanadu Publishing. With 20 years of custom publishing experience supporting both higher education and K through 12 schools, Xanadu Publishing has been helping districts improve relevancy, equity, and access through customized instructional materials. Rather than asking students to adapt to a standard off-the-shelf resource, Xanadu's custom solutions help you make education personalized and affordable by giving you control to create customized instructional materials. At Xanadu, we empower curriculum creators to take back control of the content, quality, and costs of your instructional materials. You may be asking yourself, why would districts be interested in custom publishing today? We've heard from our partners that the traditional textbook model is not meeting the needs of the classroom today. One textbook does not meet the needs of every student across the nation. Our students are unique, our instructional materials should be too. Districts also need the flexibility to alter instructional content based off of current events, unexpected standards changes, or new mandates. We're also very well aware that the cost of textbooks are at an all-time high and budgets are shrinking, which are making content decisions tough. Xanadu Publishing is proud to have helped districts across the United States create custom materials. Our guest of honor, Dr. Carla Manning, is going to inspire us with tools and tips that helps districts address curriculum that may need to include multiple perspectives, cultural relevance, or equity and inclusion. If gaps do exist, most likely the texts that benefit your district will not be found in an off-the-shelf resource. Xanadu Publishing is suited to support your district in the creation of a custom workbook or reader that would include high-quality, standards-aligned texts, primary sources, articles, excerpts, poems, or even district-created content. After this presentation, we will include contact information for those who are interested in scheduling a complimentary custom consultation. But at this time, I am now pleased to introduce our host for today's masterclass. Dr. Carla Manning is an educational equity consultant and CUNY University lecturer who helps educators and school districts strengthen their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Dr. Manning has a PhD in curriculum and instruction from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a master's degree in curriculum instruction from Concordia University, Chicago, and a bachelor's degree in English education from Tennessee State University. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Manning. Dr. Manning, take it away.
Excellent, excellent. Good day, everyone. I'm excited to be here with this presentation. Okay, I'm excited to be here. Unfortunately, I am having some technical issues because I can't see the screen for some reason. And it seems as if I just started talking and then I can't even see the screen. So I'm happy to begin.
Hi, Dr.
But
Manning.
Mhm.
It's Chris, your technical advisor. I have made you the presenter, and you should see in your control panel the ability to share your screen under the sharing menu.
Okay, so I do see that, Chris. I thought you were driving the slide.
We will go ahead
Okay,
and do that.
excellent.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm excited to be here with you all. You can go to the next slide, Chris. Thanks. I'm excited to be here with you all to begin having these conversations. These are very necessary conversations, particularly at this time. But I would encourage all of us as educators and school leaders to be courageous as we engage in these conversations about equity, inclusion, and culturally responsive education. So these 4 agreements of courageous conversations come from the work of Glenn Singleton with his book, Courageous Conversations About Race. So for any of you all on the call who are interested in exploring that topic further, check out Glenn Singleton's work, Courageous Conversations About Race. So for today, I always like to start off any conversation with these particular agreements. We can agree to stay engaged. So, let's try to minimize distractions as much as possible. We can expect to experience discomfort. And this is important because some folks may be uncomfortable with some of the ideas that may be presented. But these experiences of discomfort are necessary in this journey of culturally responsive education. So I want to encourage all of us to be okay with some discomfort that we might experience. Let's speak our truth. Let's speak our truth. We are all of us have our own truths and stories, and so all of us are encouraged to speak our truth. And then lastly, we can expect and accept a lack of closure, which might mean that particular questions or issues may be raised. Yeah, we might not have an answer for right now, and that's okay because, again, this is a journey. So let's begin with today's conversation on having equity and inclusion in our curriculum. So here are some guiding questions to help facilitate our thinking for today. 1, how are we defining equity and inclusion? What do these particular terms mean? And then what does it mean to assess curriculum for equity and inclusion? So I'll just pause right here. First, when we say the word equity, what we're talking about is essentially ensuring that everyone is achieving the same outcome. When we're talking about equity within schools, we're talking about the degree to which students have the resources to experience academic achievement. And does every student have the same resources that they need responsibly to experience academic success? Inclusion is about the extent to which all voices and identities and experiences are welcomed at the table and folks' perspectives are included in the conversation. And so when we're talking about assessing curriculum for equity and inclusion, what we're talking about is thinking about a particular framework and thinking about how our curriculum addresses equity and inclusion. So do students see themselves in the curriculum? Are their experiences and realities represented in what they are learning about? And do they feel welcome? Are their stories welcomed in the text that they are reading? So we'll talk about this today. It is extremely important for educators and school leaders to seriously reflect upon their curriculum through a lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a consultant, I'm doing some work with school districts in this very topic because the ways that we think about our curriculum is extremely important. Curriculum is important because, one, when we say the word curriculum, what we're talking about is knowledge. When we say curriculum, what we are talking about is knowledge. We're talking about the degree to which people make meaning from the knowledge that they are acquiring. So it is important for teachers and school leaders to reflect upon their curriculum because I'm assuming, and I'm speculating, but I'm assuming that you are working with somewhat of a diverse school district. The degree to which it is diverse, I don't know. But we all need to really think about the degree to which our curriculum represents DEI. And even for today, we're just having a 1 hour conversation here, folks. But these are conversations that deserve lengthy processes. These are conversations that require some systemic strategies and conversations. So let's go on, Chris, and let's go ahead and begin. So here are 5 areas, if you will, to help us to think about the degree to which our curriculum is equitable and inclusive. These are my suggestions, okay? I don't necessarily know if this is law, okay, which might mean that if you speak to another consultant, they may have a different set. But this is what works for me. This is my truth. And even as I look at this, I can even add a couple of more strands or modules to this. But when we're talking about a framework for assessing curriculum, let's think about 5 areas. Let's think about how our authors are represented. Let's think about how our characters are represented. Let's think about issues of multiple perspectives, right? Which is at the core of multicultural education. Multicultural education isn't just about food, fun, and festivals. Multicultural education is about inviting multiple perspectives into the conversation. Criticality and social justice is another topic. We'll talk about that today. And then one of my favorite topics is digital and media literacy, a necessary to talk in today's context. All right, Chris, thanks. Let's continue, please. All right. So here's one of the first things that we can begin thinking about here, folks. How are our authors represented within the curriculum? So when we're talking about representation, we're talking about the degree to which students in our schools are reflected in the curriculum, the extent to which they are being exposed to a group of diverse authors, characters, identities, and cultures. Representation can sometimes be just a token gesture, putting non-white or female characters in the place of white male characters. So a lot of schools right now are doing this work when they're thinking about making their curriculum or ensuring that their curriculum is equitable and inclusive. So authorship is important because the person who is telling the story has a huge impact on the story, right? And there's a lot to even unpack even with this particular topic. And a question that comes up a lot when we're talking about representation of authors is around, I guess, veracity of experience. So what I mean by that is, let's just say, for example, can a white author accurately talk about the Black experience within a book? So, for example, who can be the author of people's experiences? Are Black people only allowed to write about the Black experience? Are Asian Americans only allowed to write about the Asian American experience? And so what I bring this up to say that oftentimes in school districts, there are books in the curriculum where the topic is talking about a particular cultural subject, but the author of that book may not match the culture of the conversation of the book. And this is a bit concerning, okay? And I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong, but what I am saying is that when we're talking about authors, let's do our best to have some alignment in terms of cultural representation. So if the book is about the African American experience, let's choose books that are written by African American authors. And again, that's not to say that people who are non-Black cannot write about the Black experience, but there is more authenticity that comes through the content when the cultural groups are aligned. So when we're talking about representation of authors, let's think about that. But then also, and then Chris, you can go to the next slide. Do I have? Yes. So also we can engage in an activity where we can do some more quantifying and where we can do some deeper levels of analysis. So here is a screenshot of a scorecard that I politely borrowed from the NYU Metro Center. But if any of you all want this particular document, you can easily just Google, what I have here at the source, NYU Metro Center Curriculum Scorecard, and the entire document will come up. But within that document, they provide some activities that folks can engage in, that educators can engage in. And so this is one of the activities. So literally what we can do is literally, plan to be here for 2 hours, 3 or 4 hours, and try to, gather all of our books within our district. And if we're talking about a large school district, that might take some more time. But what we can do is we can actually just sit down and do some quantifying and tallying to see, how many of what particular group or identity is represented within our curriculum, so that we can have a clear understanding. So representation of authors is a good place to start when we are thinking about assessing our curriculum for equity and inclusion. The second part that we can focus on, or the second element that we can focus on, is diversity of characters. Diversity of characters. And so character representation is important. Character representation is important. I remember as a girl, I used to love to read. I loved to read. I used to read the Boxcar Children books, R.L. Stein, Goosebumps, and Fear Street. I loved reading. But as a girl, as a Black girl, I was always aware of the racial identity of the characters that I was reading. I was always aware. And as a Black girl, of course, I loved to read books that had characters that spoke about my experience. Now, factor, but who the people were in the book is important. So in the next slide here, Chris, I'm going to share a few statements that we can reflect upon to help us think about how our characters are represented. Okay, so these are some questions that we can ask ourselves, some preguntas.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Dr. Manning. We lost you for about 10 or 12 seconds there.
Yes, okay. Can you hear me now, though?
We've got you.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, I was calling from my phone, and for some reason the call just totally dropped. So I'm on my computer now. I apologize, you all, about the technicals. So when we're talking about representation of characters, here are some statements that we can reflect upon. One, do we see references to different ethnic and cultural traditions, languages, religions, names, and clothing within the books? Okay, do we see this? The next question that we can ask ourselves, do we see diversity in terms of particular ethnicities and nationalities that are portrayed? So we have here, are all Asian families Chinese? Are all Latino families Mexican, et cetera, et cetera? Do we see some diversity within particular ethnic groups? Now here's another one that that folks need to, to be open-minded. I would encourage us to be open-minded about is family structure, right? I mean, I would say that for the most part, America has an assumed normality around family structure, right? The mom, dad, sister and brother, and the pet dog, okay? But within books, within curriculum, we can be open to the fact that there are diverse family structures. Whether we agree to it or not, really doesn't have a place in terms of the curriculum, because we want to be open to different ideas. Now, I'm going to be honest, the family structures and the representation of family structures, this needs some additional conversations, okay? Because there is, some tension in terms of how teachers and families see this one. But diverse family structures, do we see representation and do we see diversity in family structures within curriculum? So for example, do we have texts where single parents are mentioned, where same-sex parents are mentioned? What about families who might live in a shelter, or children might live in a foster home, or families that may be experiencing homelessness? Do we see different family conditions and living conditions, as well as family structures within the texts. Here's another one, the fourth bullet point. I like this one. Characters of color are main characters and not just the sidekicks. I like that one. Okay. And this one is just, well stated. Okay. So are the characters of color main characters? Are the protagonists the main characters, or are they just the sidekicks? Are they the folks who we add on, or are they the main people? Characters of diverse cultural backgrounds are not represented stereotypically or presented as foreign or exotic. Okay. Another point to think about in terms of bias, in terms of how people are represented stereotypically. So, for example, are children reading books where the only experience about Black people is slavery? Okay, the only books that's in the curriculum is about slavery. Okay, so we have to think about the larger message that is being sent. This is how people can now inform their understandings of the African American experience. It's through this lens of struggle and oppression, primarily because this school district is only talking about the African American experience through a lens of slavery. So we can think about how people and how particular stories and narratives about people are presented within the curriculum. Because again, when we think about curriculum, we're talking about knowledge. We are talking about knowledge, and we are talking about how people make meaning of the knowledge that they are reading about within their textbooks. And then the last one, problems faced by people of color or females are not resolved through the benevolent intervention of a white person or a male. So again, thinking about how folks are represented and their levels of ability as well. There's a lot to talk about here, people, so we can really go in depth with these conversations. And so again, here's another activity very similar to the one before. Folks can do the same work, also thinking about representation of characters. So we can do this with authors, and then we can do some of this analyzing with characters as well. Thanks, Chris. All right. Multiple perspectives. Okay. Strand number 3, multiple perspectives. Are there multiple truths, perspectives, lived experiences, histories, interests? Okay. Is this represented within a curriculum? Okay. Or is the narrative a single one-sided narrative? Okay. Now this one is where it gets a little fuzzy and hairy. Okay. Because everyone has their own truth, okay? And some of this can get philosophical because it is also about whose version of the truth are we telling, okay? And this is where some of the hiccups come, because some people might believe that their way of thinking and their truth is the truth and everyone else has to believe it, okay? And there are people who are very open to different sort of truths and perspectives. For example, and I'm going to give an example with this first bullet point, and this one is an example that causes some tension, without a doubt. This one is an example. This example causes tension without a doubt. But this is an example that immediately comes to mind, and I think about Christopher Columbus, right? Now, the story of Christopher Columbus is what everyone traditionally knows, was that he was coming to America on behalf of the Queen, and he essentially came to America to explore America. That is his truth, his perspective, okay? But from the truth or perspectives of Indigenous and Native Americans, they may have a completely different story. But oftentimes, whose story do we read about within textbooks? Whose perspective are we acquiring within textbooks? Oftentimes, we do not hear the perspectives of Indigenous and Native Americans who were on the receiving end of Christopher Columbus, adventures. We oftentimes do not hear their perspectives. So that is an example of what I'm talking about. Are there multiple truths and perspectives? Are there multiple modalities for students to demonstrate learning, right? This is important here, because when we're thinking about Gardner's eight multiple intelligences, we are reminded that all of us have different learning styles. And as a result, all of us can express our learning and demonstrate our learning within various learning styles as well. So what I mean by that is, every student, for example, the verbal intelligence, if we're thinking about those 8 intelligences, the verbal intelligence is a popular one. But there are many students where the verbal intelligence is just not their strong suit. Their strong learning style might be the artistic, or perhaps the visual or the musical. So then if that's the case, we may not ask a student to write a paper because the verbal intelligence may not be his strong area. Now, of course, we want to get him there, of course, but we are reminded that as educators, we can incorporate these different modalities from time to time. So, for example, instead of asking a student to write a paper, let's ask him to put on a performance or create some sort of a digital or art, visual text that can also demonstrate his learning. So there's a lot that can be unpacked with the multiple modalities. The third question, do students have opportunities to contribute to the curriculum? Okay, we don't really see this enough. Okay, we don't see this enough because I believe that as educators and, even folks who have the advanced degrees and the PhDs, we believe that we know everything. Okay, let's just keep it real. We believe that we know everything. And to some degree, we do know a lot, okay, because our degrees have conferred that. So that's not to downplay what we know or don't know. But this third question is asking us to be inclusive in students' participation in the curriculum that they are receiving, okay, that they are on the recipient end of. So that's another way to look at it, is that students, they have a right, they have a role, they have even a responsibility to be in control of what they learn about. Okay. And like I said before, this is not really practiced enough and a lot. Okay. Oftentimes we just don't have those conversations about how students can contribute to what they want to learn. But that is a way for us to create these multiple perspectives. Let's create some sort of systems or opportunities for students to give feedback to what they're learning. I mean, it can be as simple as a survey. It can be a little bit more deep, where we may have a town hall or a focus group where we just have students even vocalize what they want to learn about, or even give feedback to what they don't want to learn about. I believe that students' voice, does have a place within those decision-making processes. And then lastly, is the district's curriculum inclusive of racially and culturally diverse histories and identities? Okay, we just have to say it. Okay, we just have to say it just like that. Okay, and also again, being mindful of how a particular historical narrative is taught. Okay. There's some movement going on, and much love to any people on here from Texas. This is not I'm not throwing tomatoes. I'm just using this as an example. But I'm hearing that in Texas, there's some work where school districts are trying to remove the word slave or slavery or plantation. I forget the specific word, but they're trying to remove that particular word from the curriculum. And instead, they don't want, the word slave to be used. Instead, they want to say workers. Okay, they want to reframe the word slave to workers. But a worker assumes what? A worker assumes compensation. Okay, a worker assumes a willingness to work. And of course, that was just not the experience of slavery. It was just not. And what I read from that is that this particular school district or state is trying to remove particular histories from the curriculum. Just by switching up words and reframing language is a way to remove particular histories. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, that is not an inclusive move to make. An inclusive move is to really unpack and really share the particular histories and experiences about all people that are represented within that school district. So multiple perspectives is a lot of work. It is necessary. It is bumpy. There are hiccups. And this is where some of this where some of this discomfort, where really, might really be elevated, because addressing multiple perspectives is, it can be wrestling, if you will. Okay, thanks, Chris. Next, please. All right, thanks. So the fourth element for us to think about is criticality and social justice. Okay, one of my favorite topics to talk about with curriculum. But this is the extent to which students have the opportunities, to basically critique the status quo, where students have the opportunity to critique, to become aware of, and to critique systems of oppression. Okay, so systems of oppression as it relates to race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, religion, language, etc. Criticality and social justice is about the degree to which students can raise these critical questions. Why do we see X, Y, and Z? Why is there X, Y, and Z? Why don't we see enough of X, Y, and Z? When X, Y, and Z happened, what did that really mean? So providing opportunities and providing moments within the curriculum for students to raise these critical questions is important. And it's one that I think would really be of value, because, whether school district leaders and educators want to recognize this or not, young people are very much involved in social movements, very much so. And so, to incorporate these conversations of social justice within the curriculum is already very much aligned to what a lot of young people are already naturally doing outside of school anyway. So, there definitely deserves, some space within a traditional curriculum to have conversations about social justice. Thanks, Chris. All right. Lastly, another one of my favorite topics I love to talk about is digital and media literacy. Oh my goodness, I love talking about media literacy. I see media literacy primarily in two ways. One, media literacy is about providing students with the opportunity to critique representations and critique what they are accessing in the media. And then media literacy is also about students having the opportunity to create and to produce media that aligns with their perspectives. So media literacy is also, sort of a youth culture phenomenon as well. And when we say media, we're talking about, really almost everything, but we're talking about news journalism, advertisements, commercials, any genre of music, newspapers and magazines, billboards, social media, even fashion. Fashion can even be considered media. So digital media literacy is about providing students with the opportunities to critique what they are consuming. And this is extremely important, particularly because so much of what young people access is using the media, particularly social media. So it is important for students to learn how to, distinguish fact from fiction, if you will, in terms of what they are consuming on social media, so that they have an opportunity to know what the truth is for themselves. But those skills have to be taught. Those skills have to be taught within a curriculum. And then also, digital media literacy invites us to produce particular media texts, to create media texts. When I was a graduate student at UW-Madison, I didn't want to be broke over the summer, so I had to take a job. And so a job that I had was I was working for like a pre-college summer camp, and so these were middle school students who wanted to, have a college experience over the summer. So the class that I offered was media literacy, and basically with this class, what I did was I taught students how to create digital stories, and so we learned all about digital storytelling. And I showed them how to use iMovie using a Mac computer, how to create different, clips and frames, and they can throw music in there and all of that. But the story that they created had to address a social issue. And I wanted them to be intentional about that. And the digital stories that they created were great because they had a lot of issues that they wanted to address. So media literacy can also be a lot of fun because we're talking about issues that are visual and that are cultural and that are even controversial. But for some people, those can be some fun conversations or engaging conversations, I might say. So digital and media literacy, you all, definitely has a necessary space when we're talking about transforming and assessing our curriculum, or assessing and transforming our curriculum for equity and inclusion. Let's consider digital and media literacy within those conversations as well. All right. Yes. Okay. So, okay, go ahead, Chris. So here are some additional points that we can think about when modifying or transforming our curriculum for equity and inclusion. We can expect to have some resistance and reluctance, okay? Because everybody may not be on board with modifying our curriculum. Parents and families may have some qualms. Teachers may have qualms. Even students may have qualms about what they are going to learn about. So we do need to be prepared to address resistance and reluctance. As I mentioned before, let's be diligent about creating opportunities for student and parent input. Even parents who might have, a perspective that is sort of traditional or conservative, those perspectives should be invited as well. As I mentioned before, reflection on multiple modalities of student learning. We have to think about school board buy-in, okay? Particularly if we are making specific changes to curriculum policies and within the district. Some of those policies need to be approved by the school board. So there may also need to be some collaborative conversations with the school board as well, because oftentimes they have the final say in what is happening within a curriculum because they have to approve it. And then a last concern that really needs some more in-depth exploration is around how do we align particular topics within a curriculum? How do we align that with standardized tests or with Common Core state standards? Okay, I'm working with the school district in Harlem, for example, and that's one of the concerns that were raised. And they are saying like, hey, we have this standardized curriculum, but what we are trying to do in our current curriculum to make it equitable and inclusive is not really aligned with the standards. And so I'm working with them in that particular regard. So, there are some larger issues that need to be addressed as well, and I don't want to ignore those as well. Okay, next, please. And then I have some more information. We're almost done here though, folks. Environmental justice. So different ways to modify curriculum to be culturally responsive, equitable, and inclusive. We can think about environmental justice, right, folks? We can think about the ways in which inequities and injustices are happening within our environment, right? I'm thinking about the Flint water crisis, for example. I'm thinking about climate change. I'm thinking about sustainability, right? Thinking about how we can incorporate gardening and nutrition within our curriculum, right? Teaching students how to grow their own food. So there's a lot that can be done with environmental justice. Economic justice is one that everybody needs, okay? Everybody. Children and adults, okay? We all need to learn about financial literacy. That's really what I should have put in there. Instead of economic justice, I should have put the words financial literacy, because we need to have some very, very specific conversations around financial literacy and financial education. And like I said, very humbly, both for children and for adults, these are very, very necessary conversations. Of course, racial and ethnic justice is always, a specific moment that is needed within our curriculum. We can always develop and improve our awarenesses within race and ethnicity, and then, of course, within gender as well. So again, some different ways of thinking in terms of modifying our curriculum.